Hello, hello. We are back on No Coast by Squaretable. This is episode 7. This week we're a little short-handed. Just me and Surreal. Nate had some other obligations and couldn't exactly find Brock, but he'll hopefully join us a little later on. But we're short-handed, and we're going to try to make the best of it on penalty kill, a little hockey analogy. It's a big sports weekend, so we're also going to do two parts. Today we'll have part 1. Rio and I will talk about little NHL playoffs, some NFL draft preview, and Mayweather-Pacquiao, of course. And then on Friday, we'll talk NBA playoffs and some reactions to the first round of the NFL draft. But for now, Rio, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Hawks advanced. Obviously, I'm pleased with that. So let's start there. In the West for the NHL and the Hawks and everybody else around that's advanced.
So obviously we have the Hawks through, we have the Wild through. That's a great series. I think that's going to be the de facto Western Conference Finals because the other two teams on the other side from the Pacific are just not nearly as strong, in my opinion. We had the Ducks sweep the Jets, but that was probably one of the least convincing sweeps I've ever seen.
It was a series in which the Jets, the inexperienced team, just couldn't hold a lead. I'm not sure if in the future maybe they add another piece, but I'm not impressed with the Ducks. We've talked about it before.
Right. That's one of those. Like the Jets played well for 55 minutes and didn't play well for 5, and then that's the 5 that they lost the game in, kind of thing in a few of those games. That series, obviously, the Ducks won. I was excited to see the Flames win, too. The Flames knocking off the Canucks. I feel like no one outside of Vancouver really likes the Canucks enough to want them to win anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the Canucks are an older team. They're another team like the Ducks where they didn't have enough depth. Their top line is older, too, so it wasn't surprising. It's nice to see Calgary back in relative again. They have their young guns like Backlund, and there was someone my dad was telling me the other day. There was someone that played 3-minute shift. So that team's hungry. That team is ready to be relevant again. I'm not sure if they're going to be Anaheim. They could, but it was nice to see them sort of stick it to the Vancouver too. Moving over to the East. Since we have our set West, moving over to the East, what do you think about the Eastern Conference first round?
Montreal and Ottawa is a better series than actually no. I'd say that series pretty much matched my expectations. Montreal was pushed by Ottawa in the regular season, and then they were pushed in the playoffs quite a few games. They have obviously the reason they won that series is because Carey Price is super good. That offense really struggles. That offense is stagnant.
Ottawa's or Montreal's?
What? Montreal, sorry. Ottawa's a good team. They'll be good next year. They'll be good for a few years. Montreal's offense is really stagnant. I think they'll struggle upcoming. And I think that because of that struggling offense, as much as goaltending and defense wins you championships, you still got to put the puck in the back of the net. That's still the name of the game.
Well, that's where I was going to touch on. What do you think of that disallowed goal in Game 6? Sort of screwed Ottawa there a little bit.
I think that
control of it. Did you see the clip?
I actually did not. I actually was not watching that game. Yeah, go for it. Yeah, tell me.
I'm pretty sure Carlson shot it on net. I'm not sure number 44 is for the Senators, a third or fourth line player. Not really familiar with them all together, but Carlson shot it on net, and the referee blew the whistle, but Price clearly never had control of it. It got loose. The guy hit it into it, but because the whistle had blown, the goal was disallowed. And obviously, in a game that ended 2-0, but one being an empty netter, that sort of cost the young team, the Senators, their entire season.
I think that falls under. Sorry, that falls under they have the intent to blow it down. They have that rule that's the intent to blow the whistle kind of thing. If they can't see the puck, and they'll put the whistle in their mouth and they'll just go. I remember last year in the Sharks Kings series. They had one of those that went against the Sharks because the ref put his whistle up to his mouth and then was about to blow it, didn't blow it, and it was a similar situation where it was uncovered but ended up in the net and the goal counted. So I think that's one of those touchy calls. Yeah, you're right. Probably screwed over the Senators to some extent. I don't know. I think, but I'm not overall too upset about it because Montreal was the
I'm
better
not
team.
upset about it. Montreal's still the better team. They still probably would have won a game 7 if there was a game 7. But it's just like, besides the playoff conversation, I feel like the officials now, where there's a season where there's so little margin for error, they're a little too trigger happy, And even in the say in the Caps Isle series, in a nice little transition, the game 7. I mean, that game had no penalties, but that's because they wanted to let the players play. There's no set standard when there were so many hooking calls, so many physical hits, and justified playoff hockey. No, if someone commits a penalty in Game 7, you give them the power play. You put the other team in the penalty kill. I mean, I could have recalled numerous instances, and that game was so ugly and not well played. The officials, they don't have a set standard. I think that's the point I'm getting at.
Yeah, that's fair, and I know that every officiating crew is different and all that in what they allow, and you're as players you should cater to that. But at the same time, I think that's how it's going to be as long as we have this officiating where you're always going to have subjective calls. But I think that's part of the name of the game. You have to adapt to how the officiating crew allows the games to play. Obviously, we're not going to be happy about it a lot of the time, but that's just how it's going to be. That series was great overall, 7 games. I had picked the Capitals to win that series, but definitely could have gone either way. The other series.
Before we move on, they were outplayed.
Yeah, definitely outplayed.
It was Holtby really winning them the series.
Yeah.
And then Halak stepped up in Game 7, but when you only have 11 shots on goal, you're not really going to do anything if you're the Isles.
Yep. And then, let's see, the other series was – I am dropping the ball. Oh, the Rangers.
Series,
the
Rangers and
yeah.
That was as expected, a quick 5 games, but I'm a little more weary that each of the games weren't exactly blowouts, and each of the games went down the third period, where the Penguins, for all their injuries they have with all their forward injuries and not having their 3 best defensemen, I mean, they put up a fight.
Yeah.
Is it more of a knock on the Rangers that maybe they're not as good as everyone thinks they are, or maybe just the Penguins, stepping up in playoff hockey and like some kind of cliche? Oh, we're gonna play hard now and we're gonna fight to the end of our season. I couldn't understand it.
I think it's got to be a combination of the two. While obviously the Rangers have been hyped because they played a great regular season, they were hot down the stretch. And they came in President's Trophy winners. A lot of people are picking them to win the Stanley Cup. But that being said, and maybe they're coming up short to that kind of hype, which happens to a lot of the teams that come in looking like championship teams.
Yeah.
Like I've seen that with the Sharks for years. People hype them in and then they get destroyed. But also something to account for with the Penguins is they still have the 2 best players on the ice. Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin are the 2 best players in the series.
But Malkin didn't have a good series.
I know, but just the fact that they have the 2 best players, that has to mean something in terms of production, in terms of competitiveness.
I think it also. No, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. Keep going.
I think it also had to do, and I might be the only one that'll point this out, that not many other writers will point out. The Rangers aren't exactly a puck possession team. They can roll 4 lines, and they have the deepest defense in the league, but they rely more on their forecheck, and they have a lot of size and they have a lot of speed, but they're not exactly the best puck possession team. They don't maintain possession. They don't have a high Corsi or whatever you want to call it. And I think teams that, like you just mentioned, the 2 best players on the ice, Malkin and Crosby, those are possession players, and it sort of allowed the Penguins to carry play for more than they should have. If there's one weakness the Rangers have, it's puck possession team. If they run into a team like, say, Tampa or Chicago or Minnesota, obviously Chicago or Minnesota would be in the Cup final. Ranger fans or the Rangers have to be wary about that.
Yeah, that's definitely, and that's why teams like in the past We've seen teams like Nashville. They're not a good possession team. They haven't been historically, especially under Barry Trotz. They improved this year, but under Barry Trotz, when they were the defensive-minded checking team that they made the playoffs for quite a few years in a row and fell flat on their face because they couldn't hold on to the puck. The puck possession is hugely important in the playoffs, so that's something to consider as well. You're right. We'll see with once again when Washington has two of at least the top 3 players on the ice during the next series, if not the 2 best players in Backstrom and Ovechkin.
Well, I mean, Ovechkin isn't as good as, or Ovechkin's more of he's more of the sharpshooter score type player.
Right.
Backstrom, I would put Nash in the same conversation as those two. After that, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, that's why I mentioned 2 of the best 3 players in the series, if not the 2 best. But that's something to consider. And then finally, the last series is the one that's still going. They're going to play tonight, Tampa and Detroit. Yeah,
I'll check on that. Hold on. Because I think the Game 7 is actually going on right now.
That's already started?
They started at 6.
Yeah. It started, yep.
There should be a score.
It's
they are 0-0, I believe.
Yep.
Half through the first, or like a few minutes in the first.
No, a few minutes.
So anyway, you picked Tampa.
I did.
But, and moving over now to our second round previews, we don't have Brock, so we can't exactly go in all detail. But we'll start with Tampa and Montreal, or Detroit and Montreal. I assume you would actually just differentiate between the matchup there, I guess.
Yeah, so if Detroit wins this game today, I think Montreal has it over Detroit. I think that's a talent versus experience situation. I think that obviously there's a huge gap between Carey Price and whoever the bipolar. They're going with Mrazek right now. Obviously, he's been goodish this year.
Mrazek's been really good. I mean, you saw the save he made the other night with the wide open net. Mrazek's played very well.
Yeah, so I doubt that'll change. I think Mrazek will be the goalie, but once again, obviously, Carey Price is head and shoulders above most everyone else, and I think that the Canadiens win that series in that case. But if we're looking at, say, the Lightning making it through, as you were talking about puck possession, I think, and the way the Lightning dominated the Habs in the regular season, 5-0 against the Habs in the regular season, the puck possession team, high scoring team, it's going to be a complete offense versus defense matchup, and I think Tampa Bay can pull that one off.
But it doesn't worry you seeing the struggles Tampa's had against Detroit with the Detroit. I mean, Detroit's a team that's clearly slower than them. Despite any experience they have, clearly slower than them. Not as good puck possession-wise, but Detroit plays a very disciplined game. Montreal plays the same type of game. You wouldn't think that the Red Wings could steal a game there, too, and win the series?
I don't know. Right now, what I'm thinking is taking it off of the regular season. And I know that the regular season playoffs obviously a different animal, but I think I'll stick to what I said about Tampa Bay because I'm high on Tampa Bay enough that I expect them to be in these conference finals.
Yeah, no, I don't necessarily disagree with you. I'm just saying that the Wings they're one of those teams you can never count out.
Right.
For all of the rivalry they used to have with the Hawks, still have, I guess, but it's obviously not in the same division. I grew to respect them, and then you get a first-hand perspective of, they're like the Spurs, they're like the Patriots, they're at least like that in the same model that you can never ever count them out, no matter how down they are. No one expected them to push Tampa to 7. I'm not sure many saw this series going 7. I'm pretty sure was it you or I looked at several bracket challenges. People expected Tampa to roll in 5.
I did say 5, yeah.
It would be dangerous to count the wins. I do agree though. Montreal would advance, and Tampa still the superior team that would be able to beat Montreal. Moving on to the West, Ducks and Flames, the 2 third-period monster teams that aren't exactly the deepest. The Flames are much younger, while the Ducks have really only one consistent line or a few players that have been in these biggest games. Who do you like there?
I think we defer on this. I picked the Flames in 6 games. I think this is one of those teams. It's a feel good story as much as anything, but I think that as we've been talking, as we've been ragging on the Ducks for being not deep enough, for being a super overrated division winner, I think that the Flames, they've looked great in the playoffs, and I think they'll move forward.
No, the Flames they've been good. I'm just not sure if they can keep this sort of run going. If it's hard to maintain these kinds of comebacks. I mean, Anaheim obviously isn't that good of a team. I'm not sure if I pointed out these stats before, but they were 18th in goal differential overall in the league. So, I mean, outside even the last playoff team, no team outside the top 10 has ever won the Stanley Cup. They had an unreal record in 1-goal games, which is completely unsustainable.
Right.
I mean, they couldn't outscore teams. They were awful on the penalty kill. They had an awful power play. What they did in Winnipeg, or with Winnipeg, was essentially the same thing they did in the regular season, but Winnipeg's not a puck possession team. Winnipeg was a team that's not experienced, or Winnipeg's not a team that's fast. I'd like to – again, this is like sort of like with Detroit and Montreal. Like, I'm not going to count the Flames out because of everything I just pointed out about the Ducks. But in the Ducks, just essentially at this point being an older, more experienced version of the Flames, that's what I have to give the edge to Anaheim.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. The other series, Minnesota and Chicago.
You want to start? You want to end with that, or go back to the East?
Oh yeah, I guess yeah. We'll end with Minnesota. Chicago's best series, I think, in the playoffs. So.
Okay, so then we have Rangers Caps.
Yep.
So thoughts on that?
So once again, we kind of touched on it earlier. Rangers don't look great. Capitals also really don't look great. I picked the Rangers in 7 games, I think, just because they haven't looked dominant, and the Capitals have the 2 best players, or 2 of the 3 best players, as I mentioned before. And I think it'll just be, honestly, it's probably my least favorite series to watch out of the 4.
It's going to be so ugly. I mean, this is going to be like Steelers-Ravens NFL-wise without any of the actual exciting hockey. These teams, they're going to clog up the neutral zone. They're not going to – there's neither of the teams is particularly a great puck possession team. It's going to be such an ugly series. And the fact that we're subjected to it for, what is it, the 4th time in 5 years now?
Yeah.
I mean, the Rangers by default because they're the more talented team. But like you just said – but is there any way, like, other than the fact that the Caps have Backstrom and Ovechkin, is there any other factor that you think can play into the Caps' hands to finally possibly pull an upset over a team that's eliminated them 3 out of the last 4 years?
So what we're looking at there is, I think it's important that Braden Holtby has to outplay Lundqvist. He has to outplay Lundqvist for them to have a chance, and he can. I think that he's up there in the conversation as one of the top 4, 5, 6 goaltenders in the league. And if he outplays Lundqvist, they have a good chance. I mean, that's obviously what you say about any team, but like in the other series, for example, if it's Tampa and Montreal, you're not expecting Ben Bishop to outplay Carey Price.
Right. Unless Carey Price has a collapse. But no, with Holtby, he has a worse defense in front of him, but he's proven capable. I mean, you saw him steal a few games against the Isles, and the Isles have as good or a better offense than the Rangers. I mean, in totality, if we're going off purely statistics.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he should be able to hold his own. I think more so, and I hate to just point it out on one player instead of any depth, Ovechkin can't disappear. I mean, he had a decent first series here against the Isles, but he's still capable of having his normal playoff disappearing act where he's not scoring goals or he's not doing the normal things he does that makes him such a talented and exciting player. If he disappears, I mean, they're not going to that series won't go 6 games.
Yeah, I agree.
He has to play to a top. I mean, he's a top line player, and he has to play like a top line player, which he hasn't always done. Okay, and finally, Hawks and Wild, and you didn't really respond to this. I'll let you make your case because you said Wild in 6. I'm not saying that can't happen. Obviously, it's fair to say these are the 2 best teams in the Western Conference. We're saying it's the de facto Western Conference final. So the Wild winning isn't a shock. So make your case for Minnesota, and I'll make my case for Chicago.
Right. Well, okay. First of all, I think that when you mentioned Minnesota obviously coming off a series win against a, shall we say, less than expected in terms of performance Blues squad.
I was going to mention that. That's your Stanley Cup pick. How do you feel about that?
That was my Stanley Cup Finals pick. Yeah. I'm disappointed. I'm upset. I'm a little bit sad. And they did not come to play again. Once again, the Blues did not come to play in the playoffs. They were out hit, outshot, out goaltended, they were out everything by the Wild. And the Wild,
actually, they were not outshot. If you look at the possession numbers, because I've been looking at it, just sorry to interrupt, but they dominated Corsi. What I listened to this morning, the guy who the beat writer for the Wild, Michael Russo, he talked about how the Blues were trying to play their sort of edgy game, whatever you want to call it, where they get physical with you and they hit you, and they focus more on that, even though they're still the more talented team. Well, the Wild weren't having any of it and were just playing their game, and they took whatever dumb penalties the Blues gave them and capitalized on the power play, which was they had a sparkling 30%, which is obviously really, really good.
Right.
The Blues technically outplay them if you're going based off advanced stats. They just don't have the playoff discipline.
All right. Well, I stand slightly corrected. But I think that what shows up in the Wild's play, especially since they returned from their meltdown, acquired Dubnyk, they were probably the best team in the league after they acquired Dubnyk. It's got to be said that them or the Rangers were probably the best team in the league. They were definitely the best in the Western Conference after January 14th or whatever that they acquired Dubnyk. Yeah. And then that being said, and they've been overall solid, consistent. It's hard to find faults in their play, and they're consistent. They've got a rock on defense in Ryan Suter. They play hard. They work hard. They're obviously on a great tear. And something else to consider, I think, the Blackhawks came off. It was not an easy series against the Predators at all. We didn't expect it, but the triple overtime and then the time that they spent on the ice, that's got to be something to consider. Obviously, they've rested up, but I think this is a series that it's close to 50-50, and I don't think anyone can be knocked for picking the Wild.
I don't think anybody can knock for definitively going either way. I mean, if I say Chicago, it's not like I'm super confident. I'm going to be confident in it because I'm a Blackhawks fan, but it's not like I'm going to put like so much money on it. Or if you say Minnesota, it's not going to shock you if Chicago wins. These are the 2 best teams in the West. As far as my case for Chicago, I mean, I mentioned to you in the conversation. Chicago the Chicago's best players, just in my mind, are better than Minnesota's best players. I mean, you have 3 forwards, Taves, Kane, Hossa, who I would say are definitively better than Zach Parise, the Wild's best forward. Is he not?
I would say Taves and Kane definitely. Hossa slightly, yes.
Hossa slowed down. I know you don't feel that great about him, but in most circles still have him as a top 10 wing. So he's a transcendent Hall of Fame player. You have those 3 definitive players. The Hawks are rolling 4 lines again towards the end of that series. When now with Vermette coming in and playing pretty well, at least to the standards of the acquisition they got for him at the deadline. You have an actual 5th defenseman showing up, Mikhail Roosevelt, which does wonders for Chicago now that they have more than 4 defensemen. He's not exactly Roosevelt's not exactly the greatest, but if he offers them enough okay minutes that helps enough of their really great the best puck possession game in the league. And then obviously the big guns. As I'm moving back to that, I mean Duncan Key, Patrick Sharp. Patrick Sharp having starting off with another great postseason with 5 points. Taves, Kane, Hossa, even Saad, even though Saad's hasn't hit that level yet. They have all of the components, and they still know that they they have a lot to work on. In Chicago's past, their first round series aren't exactly their best played series. I mean, you saw with Nashville all the mistakes they're making, but it's not like they haven't been through this dance before. This is obviously going to be the best played series they've had with Minnesota because Minnesota's experienced and developed so much, but. I think it just comes down to still Chicago's still deeper. Chicago still has better players. Minnesota's players have improved, but it's just the talent disparity. Then again, I would be wrong, or I could be wrong. If Minnesota steals both games in Chicago, or steals the game in Chicago, and that series ends in 6. That's how the playoffs goes. But I just think Chicago's overall lineup is better than Minnesota's lineup. That's the difference. I mean, even like you talk about someone like Dubnyk. Why is it so hard to get to?
That's a lot of. I think that people underestimate Minnesota's blue line as well. They've got they obviously have Ryan Suter, who is like a all NHL player, but then we have guys like Scandella, Marco Scandella, Jared Spurgeon, who are really underrated. Jonas Brodin, who's super underrated the entire season. I think that they match up pretty well on defense in terms of talent. And obviously, yes, Chicago has the better forwards, and they have, I would say, the better roster. But I think it's the playoffs; things happen.
Yeah, things happen. And if Chicago can't solve Dubnyk, then I mean, this is a moot point anyway. And solving Dubnyk isn't as much as solving him, but solving the defense. I mean, Minnesota. It's crazy to see how they protect the lead. It's crazy to see how disciplined they are. And how they clog the neutral zone. For a puck possession team, once they don't exactly always utilize their speed, they're more concerned with once they get a lead, they clog the space on you, which is obviously problematic against any team. But if anyone's equipped to beat that, I guess it's Chicago. Unless I'm wrong.
No, yeah, I understand that, but so I'm going to say that Minnesota wins this series. They're making the Stanley Cup Finals, and they're going to win the Stanley Cup. That's what I think right now. And Chicago, same way. I think the same thing. I don't think anyone in the East can compete with Minnesota or Chicago in a 7-game series.
Didn't you pick the Rangers to win the Cup?
I did.
I'm not judging you. You're wavering on that. You think the winner of this series wins the Cup?
Yes. That's okay. What I think.
I will have to respectively agree.
There we go.
We have Brock here trying to join. We'll have him come in and talk about John Jones after all the NHL playoff talk. That's to wrap up the NHL playoff talk. Hold on, before we have him join. So I'll say Hawks in 7. You say
Wild in 6.
Rangers and Caps.
I pick Rags in 7.
I'll pick Rags in 7. Rags in 6. Rags in 6. I don't believe in Ovi. That's why I brought it up.
All right.
Habs and Lightning. You say Lightning?
Yeah, Lightning in 6.
Habs and Red Wings.
I say Habs in 6.
Okay, I'll say Habs in 6 either way. And then Ducks and Flames. That's our pick there. Ducks in 6.
I say Flames in 6. So there we go.
Okay. A little dead spot, right? Before we have, I mean, we should we'll move over to fighting talk.
Yeah.
So Mayweather and Pacquiao. We'll talk a little bit John Jones in a second, the crazy little diva he is. But Mayweather Pacquiao, obviously a big hyped fight, probably the biggest fight in boxing. In a decent long while. I mean, in a decent while. I mean, what was that? That was the last one. The De La Hoya and Mayweather.
Yeah, it was
huge hype like this. just general thoughts on the fights, Rio.
So these are two completely different fighters in terms of how they approach boxing. We've got Floyd, who's known for his defense and his counterpunching. We've got Pacquiao, who's super aggressive, high energy. So we've got a defensive fighter versus an aggressive offensive fighter. So before I get into that, I'm going to say I think that Manny's going to win this fight. I think from what I remember, I think you disagree.
Yeah, I disagree.
Why?
But why do you say that?
My reasoning is, so I think that obviously it's not going to surprise us really either way. I don't think, at least. I think that something that we're thinking of here is obviously Floyd uses the hit and don't get hit kind of just defense first. He doesn't throw a lot. He doesn't throw very many punches. Whereas Manny swings for the fences constantly. So that's something to be considered. Where someone who's so defensive, it's harder. It's rather someone who brings a lot of pace and a lot of blows. You can't stop them all, kind of thing. And Manny, who's usually open to retaliation because of how aggressive he is, I think that the fact that Floyd doesn't throw so many punches might actually hurt Floyd in that regard. So that's where I stand on that. I think Manny wins, but it's going to be close.
With that, since we have Brock joining us, Brock, first of all, welcome. I'm a little late, which is fine. We're talking about Mayweather-Pacquiao. Thoughts on the fight? Nothing else but the fight, at least for now. Thoughts on the fight? Who you think will win? Who you think has the advantage?
Excuse me. I just finished recording before all this happened. I finished recording my UFC podcast in which I talked about this, and I'm picking Pacquiao in this fight simply because I think that Mayweather has fought dudes who are just as fast, if not faster than him, and he's fought guys that are more powerful than he is, but he's never fought someone who is both. And Pacquiao is both of those things. I think he's just as fast as Mayweather, but he's also more powerful than Mayweather. So I think what's going to happen is at some point during the fight, I'm not going to predict a round or anything, but I think that Pacquiao is going to catch Mayweather, and he's going to catch him hard. And that's going to throw Mayweather off his game pretty badly, and Pacquiao will take advantage of it and wind up knocking him out, I think. I think if it goes to a decision, it's Mayweather's fight. But I think that at some point, Pacquiao is probably going to wind up putting him down.
Do you guys think that this fight came a little too late? 8 years too late? That it might not live to the hype because of it? Because these are two aged boxers that maybe they're not exactly in their prime or anything? That it might live down to it, and that people are just really... I'm not trying to be cynical, but it's just a point.
No. I don't think so, at least. It would have been nice to have this done in 2010, whenever they were essentially in their prime. But, 5 years later, it's still going to be the biggest event in boxing history, essentially. It's going to make more money than any combat sport event has ever made, ever. People are going to be paying $100 a pay-per-view for this. It's the biggest purse ever. The tickets sold out like it was nothing. So I don't think that it's too late. It would have been nice to have it 5 years ago, whenever it should have been done. But regardless, within those 5 years, those two have still stayed as the number one and number two pound-for-pound fighters in the world. So I don't think it's been too late.
All right, fair enough. I agree.
Again, not trying to be cynical, just bringing up discussion points. Because I said things that aren't about the fight. It doesn't bother you. It doesn't bother either of you about any of, obviously, Mayweather's transgressions or Pacquiao's transgressions outside of the ring. They're not exactly two sparkling human beings. And then now everybody's giving them $100 or paying $100 to watch them, and they're both. I think Mayweather is supposed to make $120 million, and Pacquiao is supposed to make $80 million.
No, it's
they're not. This is, but again, we've had this discussion before. Nothing moral wise.
Go for it, Barack.
I don't think it necessarily matters. Even before this fight, people weren't turning off Mayweather fights just because he's kind of a terrible human being.
And can't read.
Yeah, and he can't read. People were still tuning into his fights every May to watch him fight whoever they stick in front of him. I don't think it matters, morally what he's done. I mean, everyone knows, even his fans know, he's not a good person. He's done a lot of really bad things. But because he is 47-0 and he is, one of the best fighters of all time, people are still going to tune in and watch him fight. It's not like let's say with Ray Lewis, when he was accused of murdering somebody, people didn't stop becoming Ray Lewis fans and stop watching Baltimore Ravens games because they had Ray Lewis. You still wanted to watch him play because he was a fantastic linebacker.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement. I have nothing to say.
What does that say about society, guys? Come on. What does that say about society?
When it comes to sports, we don't care. We just want to watch and see.
No, I'm not saying I care. These are just things to talk about. I'm not gonna make a pick, but wait, I'll say Mayweather. I'll say Mayweather, but I'm not that familiar with the sport. Shario, you're going with Pacquiao?
Yeah.
And then Brock, you're going with Pacquiao?
Yes.
Okay.
And Nate, who's not here, I think he'll talk about it a little bit, but I think he might be picking Pacquiao as well.
Okay, so everyone going with Manny, and I'm sticking with Mayweather. I won't be mad if I'm wrong. Speaking of terrible human beings, Brock, you've been all over this. Talk about John Jones in the UFC, the disgraced champion.
Oh, God. Firstly, I want to congratulate the UFC on finally making a good disciplinary decision. There is a lot of controversy in terms of the legality of what they did, because just in case nobody knows, all UFC fighters are technically independent contractors. So suspending an independent contractor indefinitely like that causes a lot of problems. But regardless, they had no choice. John Jones is a terrible human being, and he's been given every single chance possible to turn himself around, basically. Just a small timeline of events. In 2012, he took his Bentley Continental GT and ran it into a light post and was arrested for driving under the influence. In 2014, in December, he tested positive on December 4th for cocaine. Test was not actually released until January 6th, which was 3 days after his fight with Daniel Cormier. So he tested positive for cocaine. Basically, nothing happened because he got a $25,000 fine, and it was nothing. And then on Sunday, it was reported that he was involved in a 3-car accident, and as more information came out, he apparently took his rental car, ran a red light, smashed it into a car that had a 25-year-old pregnant woman in it, where he apparently broke her arm. And then he got out of his car, ran off, fled the scene, and then came back to check on her, maybe? No, to grab a wad full of cash, stuff it down his pants, and then run off again. And try to essentially evade the police because they couldn't find him for at least 24 hours. When the police looked through his car, they found, obviously, the rental documents that linked his name to the whole thing, but they also found marijuana and a pipe, which, I'm not as bothered by that as I would be of cocaine back in January, but regardless, he still had an illegal drug on him while he was driving that rental car. But he basically, once the police found out that the pregnant woman had broken her arm, his person of interest, suspect, misdemeanor, basically got turned into a full-on felony warrant, and he turned himself in, got out on $2,500 on a bail, and then it was reported that Dana White and Lorenzo Fertitta, who Dana White's the president of the UFC, Fertitta is, one of their high-end board members, basically writes all the checks. They flew down to Albuquerque, where they presumably stripped Jones of his title and suspended him indefinitely, which was really the only move they could do. Jones, for all the faults of the guy on a personal level, as a fighter, he's one of the best that there has been, really. He's the best fighter in the world right now. He's defended his light heavyweight title 8 times, which is a record for the division. And really, when it comes down to it, nobody in that division could beat Jones but himself. He didn't lose the title. He was taken away from him because of stupid decisions that he made outside the octagon. But it's really, the UFC had no choice. Even Dana White, I saw an article today, said that he was, we gave Jones every chance, and he just couldn't seem to hold on to it. And, Reebok dropped him from their sponsorship deal and everything. I mean, he's kind of losing everything. So as a fan of the sport, not a fan of him, I want him to get better. I would like for him to come back as a better person, just so we can see him fight. Because whether you like him or not, he's a great fighter. But something's up with the guy, and he really needs to get his stuff together. Because when you're at the level of fighter that he is, you're a role model for younger kids and such, and you can't be doing stupid things that he's been doing, and then just leaving the scene of a hit and run and coming back to grab a wad full of cash and not check on the people in the cars that you hit is just, that's just on another level of bad person. So, the guy needs to get his stuff together, and hopefully, for the sake of him and his career, he gets it together.
So 2 questions. One, does his moral transgressions bother you? And 2, is his career salvageable? More serious question.
His moral, yes. It bothers me to an extent. If they had let him fight, because he was supposed to defend his title at UFC 187 on May 23rd, which is less than a month away, and they stripped him of his title, so he's not fighting anymore. It's going to be Anthony Johnson's going to be facing Daniel Cormier for the title now. But regardless, they couldn't have let him fight. Basically, he has not fought since his top positive test for cocaine. That was going to be this fight. But if they had let him fight with all this going on, the crowd reaction would have been terrible. People would have been extremely pissed to know that the UFC let a dude who just did what he did fight, and it would have been even tougher for them to do it because Nevada, the athletic commission there, would have been really kind of up the ass of John Jones and the UFC on drug testing simply because there was marijuana in a pipe found, which is banned substance. So, it does bother me. And, as we were saying with Mayweather, his stuff bothers me, but I still tune in to watch him fight. Jones' stuff bothers me, and if he did fight, I still would tune in to fight. On one hand, because I just want to watch him fight, but also because I want to watch Anthony Johnson knock his head off. And I want to see somebody put him in his place, basically. But it does definitely bother me knowing that there's an actual human being that is out there who acts that way in the light that they're in. And as for his career, it's definitely salvageable. He's only 27 years old. Even though he's suspended indefinitely, there's a lot of people think that the UFC is not going to hold on to it for very long, maybe 6 months. I think it needs to be at least over a year, but a lot of people think it's not going to be for more than just 6 months, really. But at the young age of 27, the heights that he reached, his career is definitely salvageable if he can turn his life around.
All right. I guess we can hope, or maybe the transcendent talent gets back to it. Let's move over finally to a little NFL draft talk. With this whole weekend surrounding NFL Draft Town in Chicago and all the craze. Not really sure where to start. Let's start with let's go with the Winston and Mariota and all of their circus. Who do you guys think is the best quarterback in the draft? Do you guys think it's worth it to take a quarterback in this draft? With the first round being tomorrow, obviously.
All right, I'll talk. So I'm not a huge college football fan in the sense that I know them once they make it to the NFL, and then I'll watch them play. But college football is not big on my list of things to follow, especially because I follow so many other sports. But obviously, I know what's going on in terms of Jameis and Mariota, and I know a lot of the position players, like you've got Amari Cooper and such. Obviously, the big conversation is Winston versus Mariota as the top top pick and the second pick, and they will be the top pick and the second pick. Probably if you did this draft 99 times out of 100, that's going to be the top 1 and 2. I think at this point, people are projecting Winston to go first to the Buccaneers, and then Mariota to go second to the Titans. There's been talk with the Browns offering for the second pick. They offer 2 first-round picks, number 12 and number 19, to the Titans for number 2. I doubt that the Titans take this deal. I don't think that's in their wheelhouse at all. I think they're taking Mariota. And I think that personally, I think I'd prefer Mariota as a quarterback over Winston. There's been comps of Jameis Winston to Jamarcus Russell, which I think is insane. But overall, I think they're going to become franchise quarterbacks for their teams, in theory. But once again, we've seen that happen so many times with early round quarterbacks being taken and falling flat on their face. We're seeing that with Bradford, who's been supposed to have become one of the better quarterbacks in this league, and he just hasn't because of his knees. And then we've got guys like Bridgewater he was taken in the first round last year, right? Teddy Bridgewater? I believe so.
I think he was taken in the second round, the first pick in the second round.
Okay, regardless.
Maybe the
early round quarterback.
He was somewhere, whatever point there is, yeah.
Yeah, and then you've got guys like Cam Newton, who's taken and hasn't become said franchise quarterback per se. Matt Stafford, who's one of the older
franchise quarterback.
What?
Newton's
yeah, I guess, but he's not he hasn't become a quarterback worthy of a number 1 pick, I think, at this point in his career. Russell Wilson is definitely a better quarterback taken much later. But the point is, we're seeing
yeah. Go on.
And it's just these teams have been taking quarterbacks early, and we've seen so many of them just fall flat on their face. The draft is so hit or miss. The draft is way too hit or miss, and because of how many positions you have to account for in the draft, I think personally it's harder for me to follow, as sad as that is to say. But I think that if I'm drafting a team, I think drafting football would be so difficult for me because I can eye test a lot of the players in basketball and hockey. I can watch the players and I say, okay, that guy's going to be good. But in football, I'm not really equipped to eye test offensive linemen or defensive linemen per se, or kickers. I can't eye test a kicker for you and tell you if that kicker is going to be good. Quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, even linebackers and defensive ends to some extent I can. But that's my long-winded explanation to why I'm not so inclined to the draft. I think I'll see him in the NFL, and then I'll tell you. Check back in a year.
Brock?
Well, I actually do pay attention to college football, probably even more than I do the NFL, because I just enjoy it more. And I feel like I'm in the minority who thinking that Mariota is just a better quarterback than Jameis Winston. I think they're both NFL ready. I know some people have said that Mariota isn't NFL ready, but I think that Winston's off the field antics, I don't think they're going to stop. I think not necessarily going to get worse, but he seems just to be doing dumb thing after dumb thing, and I don't think that's going to necessarily completely come to an end yet. I think the Bucs will make a mistake if they take Winston number 1 overall. I think Mariota would be a better quarterback, and I know that his style of quarterback isn't the best type for the NFL. I think he's a spread quarterback, and that just has not boded well for the NFL, but I still think that you can mold things around him, I think, and I think that he's going to be a little bit better. I watched both of them play last year, and I personally wasn't impressed with what Jameis Winston had to offer last season. I mean, the season before was different, but I watched them play games against Florida State play games against Wake Forest and struggle heavily, and watched Winston struggle heavily against very average defenses like Wake Forest, where he should have been torching them. So when I watch these people talk about, oh yeah, Winston's by far the best quarterback in the draft, and he should be number one. He's way better than Mariota. I'm just like, that isn't like. Did you not watch the same season that I watched this past season? Because he struggled really bad against really bad teams, while Mariota looked amazing and won the Heisman. So that's my 2 cents.
Right. I agree with that. I do agree with that.
See, I'm of the opinion. I was gonna get into a whole cynical point of view on the pointless circuits of the NFL and how it tries to insert itself too much in the right calendar and extending the draft over 4 days. That's a whole different conversation altogether. I'm instead going to be cynical at the point where any conversation of Winston or Mariota being franchise changers is completely irrelevant. They aren't even the two. Neither is the best player available. Neither is the second best player available. The two best players in the draft are Leonard Williams, the defensive end from USC, who's a stud. Some people are comparing to Richard Seymour, which would be a transcendent franchise player. The guy, obviously, formerly of the Patriots and Raiders, and then Amari Cooper, a guy who could be a number one receiver for most teams, a polished route runner. Some people who are comparing him to Reggie Wayne. So the talent pool this year is so diluted, and teams are so starved for quarterbacks. I'm of the opinion you shouldn't reach for a quarterback just because you need one or just because you need one for the future. You build your team up, and then you insert a quarterback in so he can be successful. You see all of these young guys that are coming in. You see Joe Flacco coming in. He had a roster built around him, so he was able to learn in a conducive environment where he could learn how to make plays, where he had a team that supported him, and he can become a greater player. You have Matt Ryan coming into a team that already had weapons, already had a team around him, and it's the same situation. You have Russell Wilson, you have Colin Kaepernick. You're going to throw a quarterback. I mean, you see so many examples of it. Not every quarterback is equipped to do it. You see David Carr collapse under all the pressure because the Texans were incompetent. Troy Aikman is a rare example, but the Cowboys had a plan. They just had a young talent when they struggled. You take the best player available. Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota. I don't even think Mariota, in my personal opinion, is going to be a franchise changer. He's a starter. He's an NFL starter. He's a Sam Bradford. He's a better version of Johnny Manziel in terms of how he plays. There was a stat brought up about how when he has to make a throw that's not his first read, he only completes 50% of his passes. That's obviously something that he could change and he can work on. But watching him, I'm not sure if he's exactly the player you want to take to change your franchise at this point. Same thing with Winston. Brock brings it up. Everything he did through the college season, he struggled against last year teams. He wasn't exactly lighting it up. And all of the off-field transgressions. And then now these guys are supposed to be the top 2 picks in the draft. Leonard Williams, I would take Leonard Williams number 1. And then if I'm the Titans, I'd take Amari Cooper number 2. They need receivers too.
Yeah.
That's just my 2 cents. Reaching for a quarterback when you don't necessarily need one or when they're not that great is pointless to me. That's what I think.
I agree with you. The only reason why you guys like Mariota and Winston are being talked as number 1 and number 2 is because the number 1 and number 2 team, being the Bucs and the Titans, pretty much desperately need a good quarterback. So it makes sense because those are the 2 best quarterbacks in the draft. I think that whoever the Bucs pick, I think if they take Winston, they're making a mistake. But in terms of for the sake of Jameis Winston or Mariota, whoever they do take is better off than with the Titans because there are way better offensive weapons at the disposal of the quarterback in Tampa Bay than there is in Tennessee. I will say I did hear some rumors of the Eagles, of course, Chip Kelly trying to work on some package to try and get move up and get Mariota at number 2 or number 3.
Or even
I don't think that would come as a huge surprise to anyone because it's Chip Kelly and he did coach Mariota, and I think that he wants him. And he is insane, he's got 4 or 5 quarterbacks right now. It would make zero sense for him to not package a couple of them together to trade them off.
So I agree with Robert though in terms of not paying the premium to get a quarterback. I agree that Amari Cooper, for example, is a way better consideration, especially I think for the Titans who have questionable receiving core definitely. And then I think that they should be happier taking like an Amari Cooper, and then are you really that upset taking like Bryce Petty or something in the 3rd round? If you really
that would make
that.
perfect sense.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I'm of the opinion that unless the quarterback is Andrew Luck level, because you see Luck lifting a roster like the Colts per se, they're not exactly the best built team, but he's still great. He's been able to carry them to multiple 11 and 12 win seasons. That's the kind of transcendent player that you reach for or you pick at number 1. Mariota and Winston aren't those players, and those players don't come around every year. Those players come around every 10 years. You know, Luck's the new generational talent this year. Every other quarterback that you have, like Russell Wilson, he's a good player. Colin Kaepernick, he's a good player, right? Joe Flacco, these are good players, but they need an environment around them, not like Luck. Luck is the guy that's going to make the environment for himself. That's the kind of players, that's the kind of quarterbacks you pick.
Yeah, I agree. I would dispute that Colin Kaepernick's not exactly a good player, but that's a different argument for a different day.
Solid starter. He's a solid starter. I'm not gonna say he's good. He's a solid starter.
He's an okay quarterback, but regardless, yeah, I agree. Not a transcendent player. That you should be taking generational talents or the best player available at the time in the draft, especially because you're building such a huge roster. It's not like basketball where you're 2 rounds, you take guys fit your needs. More so, but in such a big draft, yeah, I think you should be taking the best player on the board.
Okay. More likely to happen. The Eagles trade up to number 2 to draft Mariota. Obviously giving up whatever combination of Sam Bradford or whoever, like whatever best package they can offer, or the Chargers trading Phillip Rivers and whatever draft picks they offer along with that.
Oh, that's tough.
I would say the Eagles is more likely, only because I'm still not fully buying the whole Chargers wanting to get rid of Phillip Rivers thing. And I think that Chip Kelly's a crazy man and would do anything to get his old quarterback back.
He's egotistical. Again, not crazy. He just thinks he can fix anybody even though he hasn't accomplished anything in the NFL.
Right, and he does kind of have this mindset of like whatever he wants, he gets done. You know, if you look at kind of like his roster, you know, he didn't really want Deshaun Jackson, so he got rid of him. He didn't really want LaShawn McCoy, so he got rid of him, and he got DeMarco Murray instead. He pretty much gets what he wants essentially, and everyone knows he wants Mariota. And I think that he's going to do whatever he can to try and get Mariota. But I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but I think he's going to try his damnedest to do it.
Saria?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's more because of the polarizing figure that Chip Kelly is that I think he'd be more willing to take that kind of risky move, whereas Phillip Rivers is an established NFL quarterback, and he's a good quarterback. Like, I don't think we can dispute that he's a good quarterback. And I don't think you give away a good quarterback for a project like Mariota. It's not like, once again, it's not like an Andrew Luck that you're getting that's going to be a transcendent player. It's Phillip Rivers, who's an established good quarterback, for a project that, for all we know, is going to fall flat on his face.
Is the Chargers' potential deal more attractive for the Titans, though?
100% more attractive, yes. I would rather have Phillip Rivers than Mariota any day of the week and twice on Sundays.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a top 6, top 7 quarterback without dispute.
Yep.
All right, well, that's just what I do for draft talk. You guys have any other final thoughts to this part 1 of episode 7 you want to add? Anything else more about John Jones?
There's not much more to say about John Jones. I mean, he said it all himself in his actions. I'm just glad that because I was very, very irate whenever the UFC did nothing whenever he tested positive for cocaine, because they have gone out of their way to make certain fighters and former fighters' lives a living hell for smoking pot. Like, they've banned guys, they've suspended guys for very lengthy amounts of times for smoking marijuana, which, when you compare to cocaine, it's not even a fair comparison in terms of the drug. And for Jones to have tested positive for something like cocaine, and then the UFC to kind of slap him on the wrist, where they've banned very good fighters for just smoking pot, I think was just absolutely ridiculous, and it spawned one of my posts about the UFC dropping the ball with John Jones, and I'm glad that they made the right call here, because I feel like the media and the fans pushed this. I feel like if the fans and the media did nothing and just kind of sat back, like they did with the cocaine thing, that Jones would still be fighting at UFC 187. But I think that they felt all this kind of pressure to finally do something, that they did it, and I'm very happy that they did.
Since we didn't have you in for our second round NHL playoff talk, let's just go through picks quickly. Suryo and I already did ours. So Rangers and Caps.
Rangers in 7. Mostly because Henrik Lundqvist is a monster, and the combination of Ryan McDonough and Dan Girardi on defense I think they'll be able to shut down Ovechkin.
Oh, he's not going to do anything, I agree. The two sort of multifaceted, Montreal and Tampa, or Montreal and Detroit. So I sort of give those picks since we haven't decided yet.
This is tough. I told you guys in our group chat I was going to pick Montreal regardless. I think if they play Detroit, they will win. But I'm kind of going back and forth on the Tampa Bay. I mean, I know I have Montreal winning the whole thing, and I'm sticking by it. So I'm going to pick them regardless. But if they will have far more trouble if they play Tampa Bay, and I'll leave it at that.
So something like Montreal in 7.
Yeah, I would say Montreal in 7.
Over Tampa, and then 6 over Detroit, unless you're underestimating them. Okay.
That sounds about right.
Ducks and Flames.
I have the Flames in 7 because they're too fast, and Frederik Andersen's not great. I mean, when they put up 7 goals, neither is Heller, but I would take Hiller over Anderson personally. And watching Hoodler, Gaudreau, and Monahan put up 7 goals in a Game 7 against the Canucks was like, that's terrifying if you're the Ducks.
I mean, the Canucks giving up 7 in a Game 7 isn't exactly shocking. That's the Canucks. That was really fun to see and watch.
It's not shocking, but it was a Game 7. It was an extremely experienced Canucks team with a better goalie and arguably just a better team going up against a very young and inexperienced Flames team, and the Flames torched them. Funny pun, but they decimated them in a Game 7, and as we know, that's not supposed to happen. And I think they ended very strong. And like I said, I think they're way too fast for the Ducks team, and I think they're more disciplined than what the Jets were. And they're not going to take as many stupid penalties on Corey Perry and Ryan Kessler.
Correction, it was a Game 6, but an elimination game regardless.
Oh, it was Game 6. My bad.
No, I'm not taking any credit away from the Flames. Just the Canucks are soft. They always have.
Yeah, they're soft. I agree, but they're going to give the Ducks problems.
And then finally, Suryo and I had a consensus. I know you have Montreal winning the Cup, so you're going to disagree. But we had a consensus that the winner of Minnesota and Chicago is the Stanley Cup winner, and probably the best series of the playoffs. We're not gonna get into your opinion on that, because obviously we know that you have Montreal winning the whole thing, so it's irrelevant to say anything. But your thoughts on this series, and then your pick. Just your quick thoughts, and then your pick.
Yeah, I quickly want to say, even though I have Montreal winning, I still don't think that even if one of them wins, that's a consensus, that they're going to be the whole thing, because there's still the New York Rangers out there. But anyways, I do think this is going to be the best series in the playoffs, and easily the best one of the second round. I'm taking the Hawks in 7. but it's going to be an awesome series. Kane has looked amazing, better than I thought he would, coming off of injury. And Taves has looked fantastic. I think the key is their goaltending. If the Hawks goaltending can hang together, if Corey Crawford can play well, if they do play Scott Darling and he plays well, then I think the Hawks will take it.
I just made the argument that the Hawks have better overall depth and better overall talent, and Surreal made the argument that like shouldn't knock the Wild either. So it's just it's technically a 50-50 series. So your sentiments aren't wrong. This is a series that can go either way. This should be to the technical Western Conference Final. It'll be fun. Yeah. Anyway, that just about does it. We talked NHL first round wrap and a little second round preview. Some Mayweather Pacquiao, some NFL John Jones, and some NFL draft preview with the first round coming up in Chicago tomorrow night. That just about wraps it up for NCB Squaretable Episode 7 Part 1. We'll be back Friday afternoon, some of us. We were shorthanded today. For Surreal and Rock, I'm Robert. Signing off.